Justice is the first virtue of social institutions, as truth is of systems of thought. The just society is not the product of a good social contract. It is the product of a good society. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The moral principles that govern a society are a matter of the greatest importance. The moral basis of a liberal democratic society is respect for the equal dignity of all citizens. The principles of justice must be chosen in a way that does not depend on the contingencies of particular societies or historical circumstances. The basic structure of society should be arranged to maximize the equal liberty of all. We should not permit the distribution of goods and opportunities in society to be determined by the arbitrary factors of birth and natural endowment. The difference principle requires that social and economic inequalities be arranged to benefit the least advantaged members of society. The principles of justice must be publicly acknowledged and enforced by the state. Justice requires that we give fair consideration to the claims and interests of all members of society, regardless of their social or economic status. We cannot claim to be a just society if we tolerate or condone discrimination based on race, gender, or any other arbitrary characteristic. Justice requires that we take account of the long-term effects of our actions on future generations. A just society allows individuals to pursue their conception of the good life, so long as they do not harm others in the process. The principles of justice are not merely formal requirements, but express substantive moral ideals. Justice is not a matter of achieving a perfect balance among conflicting interests, but of giving due consideration to the claims of all parties. The principle of fairness requires that we do not exploit the vulnerabilities of others for our advantage. The fact of reasonable pluralism in society requires that we develop principles of justice that can accommodate a diversity of reasonable conceptions of the good life. The ideal of public reason requires that the principles of justice be arrived at through a process of open and inclusive deliberation. Justice requires that we recognize and remedy past injustices, particularly those suffered by marginalized and oppressed groups. The social and economic arrangements of society should be designed to promote the full development of human capabilities. Justice requires that we respect the autonomy and self-determination of individuals, as well as the integrity of their personhood. The principle of reciprocity requires that we treat others as we would wish to be treated ourselves. The principle of solidarity requires that we recognize the common interests and interdependence of all members of society. The principles of justice are not absolute or unchanging, but must be continually refined and adapted in response to changing circumstances. Justice requires that we recognize and address the systemic factors perpetuating social and economic inequality. The moral ideal of a just society is not a utopian dream, but a practical goal that can be realized through collective effort and political will. The principles of justice are not arbitrary or subjective, but are grounded in a conception of human nature and the good life. The test of a just society is not whether it benefits the few or the many, but whether it upholds the equal dignity and worth of all persons. Justice requires that we cultivate a sense of empathy and compassion for those who are less fortunate than ourselves and work to create a more just and equitable society.